I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo with Legal AF. I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming trial in my old office, the Manhattan DA's office, where Alvin Bragg is prosecuting Donald Trump for what I would call his first election interference case. And that case, and the reason I want to talk about it is we talked a lot about it when the indictment first came down. If you recall, it was the first indictment, right? Alvin Bragg's office, the Manhattan DA's office, was the first of 4 criminal indictments to come down against Donald Trump. And at that time, there was a lot of criticism about the case. Why is this case going first? This case is a problem. Some people called it a zombie case. It relied on Michael Cohen. And it was, I would say, criticized by a lot of people. However, I was one of the people who said, this is an important case. It's not something that we should shy away from. And we should know a little bit about it, and it's absolutely worthy of being brought. And then, of course, the next several indictments came, right? There was Jack Smith's Mar-a-Lago case, there was Jack Smith's January 6th case, and then there was the Fonnie Willis, Fulton County, Georgia case. And so I feel like we've forgotten a little bit about the Alvin Bragg Manhattan DA's case, but I want to go back to it because it is looking like more and more that this case may be the first case to go to trial of the criminal cases. We thought it was going to be Jack Smith's January 6th case, which was scheduled for March 5th to begin, or maybe March 4th to begin. However, the issue is that, as we all know, because we've been talking about it, that case is now stayed while it winds its way through the appellate courts, right? Jack Smith simultaneously appealed or asked the D.C. Circuit and the Supreme Court to rule on the issue of presidential immunity because Donald Trump is claiming that he's immune from criminal prosecution and that there's absolute presidential immunity for his, what he calls, official acts, and he can't be prosecuted. And so that case still could go. It's unclear because although the Supreme Court has not expedited or has not agreed to hear that case before the D.C. Circuit rules, we don't know if all of that will happen in time for it to start in early March. I would guess that it probably won't. It'll get delayed at least a few weeks, if not a few months. And then, of course, there's the question about whether it will go at all because it'll be close to the election. So if Manhattan DA's case is the first and maybe even the only case to go before the election, I think it highlights even more why it was important that this case be brought, because it is significant, in my opinion, that the American people get to know and get to see that Donald Trump is not just a sexual abuser, right? The way he's been, he was found to be liable and to be found to be a sexual abuser to E. Jean Carroll, not just a defamer, right? Where he's been accused of and found to have defamed her as well, and also not just to be someone who's defrauded people in business, the way Judge Arthur Engoron has found, but that he's also a criminal. And this might be the only case where he will be held accountable and where he will be convicted and what will happen, right? So let's talk a little bit about the case and why it's so important. So again, it's 34 counts of falsifying a business record in the first degree. There was 11 different transactions that there are, I think, 3-ish records for each transaction. And these were payments that were made to Michael Cohen to pay him back for paying off Stormy Daniels to kill a story, so that she wouldn't come out and talk about an affair that she had with Donald Trump. And why is it that he did not want this to come out? Well, because this is coming, if you recall, right off the heels of the Access Hollywood tape where he talked about how he could grab women in their private parts and they won't say anything or do anything. You can do whatever you want. And he was bragging about that, right? And using vulgar language about women. And he didn't want another scandal to come out. He didn't want this to come out that while his wife was home convalescing after the birth of their child, he's out having sex with a porn star, because he thought that could impact the election. And so he tried to suppress the information. And then, because he would have to report this campaign donation that was made by others on his behalf, he wrote that it was something different in his books and records, and he structured the payments so that it wouldn't be a lump sum payment. He called them legal fees, even though there was no legal fee at all about this. It was paying Michael Cohen back. And it was giving him also money on top of it for doing it for him, and then grossing it up, meaning like if you're in a 50% tax bracket, for example, then you'd only get half the amount of money. So if you double it, then you get the actual amount of money that you're supposed to get. And then he could make it look like it was income, even though it wasn't. It was reimbursing him for a campaign donation. So it was absolutely an election interference case, and it's important that Donald Trump be held accountable for it. Falsifying a business records in the first degree, it's an E felony, which is a low felony. And if you recall, it's there's a falsified business records misdemeanor, but then there's also a felony, and the misdemeanor requires you to just falsify business records, right? And records that are kept in the normal course of a business in your books and records. And if it's false, then you could be convicted of a misdemeanor. However, if you were doing it to either commit a crime, cover up a crime, conceal a crime, aid someone to do that, then it bumps it up to a felony. It's a low-level felony, but it's still a felony. And each of these felonies carries with it a potential for jail time. He could get minimum probation, but he can also get up to 4 years imprisonment. And that's for each count. And so one thing that everybody should know is that, both from my experience in supervising cases like this, as well as if you look at others around the state, New York State, because Manhattan DA's office is not the only one to charge this count. In fact, many DA's offices do. And Alvin Bragg and Cy Vance, who I worked for before Alvin Bragg, when he was DA, I never worked for Alvin Bragg, but Cy Vance, who I did work for, he charged it all the time. Robert Morgenthau, who was the DA, who I also worked for before Cy Vance, also charged it all the time. And it's very common that that courts can impose jail because it's discretionary, right? They don't have to, but they can. And they can do it in a first arrest scenario, and they often do. And it's not rare. It's actually done in the normal course of things, especially when you look at who Donald Trump is and you look at the type of case this is. And one of the things you can do in New York is you look at the nature and circumstances of the crime and the history and character of the defendant when determining whether or not to impose a sentence of imprisonment. And you're allowed to take that into consideration. Now, of course, this all assumes that Donald Trump is convicted of the crime, right? Either after trial or if he pled guilty. But at the sentencing, the DA can argue and the judge can consider the context, right? They can consider him and who he is and what his character is. And they can and should potentially sentence him to prison, because this is an election interference case, right? This isn't just paying off and suppressing a porn star story. This is about committing election fraud in the 2016 election. Period. Full stop. Okay, that's what this is, and that's what the court should consider. This is not just about false business records. This is not just about covering up these hush money payments to a porn star. Like I said, this is all about influencing the 2016 presidential election, and that's absolutely what the judge will consider, and the DA will argue when suggesting that he do receive jail time. And don't forget, the Trump Organization was also convicted of tax fraud earlier. Now, Donald Trump, who's the principal of the Trump Organization, was not convicted, but the Trump Organization was. He wasn't even charged, actually. But his name was all over that. And again, it just shows how he does business, including in the Arthur and Goron case, which shows he also commits widespread fraud. That's just who he is and what he does. And so the judge will absolutely take that into consideration. And there will be lots of cases that they can draw from to show others similarly situated in the context of campaign finance violations and election fraud, et cetera, who have been convicted of falsifying business records in the first degree, have also received prison sentences. So there is precedent for it in both this charge, but also in this type of case. And I think it'll be that'll be something that the court will consider. But really, when you think about it, also let's talk about the history or the nature and character of the defendant here, of Donald Trump. Let's look at his legal history. Now, first of all, as I said before, he has a really extensive legal history, right? Mostly or all in the civil context, in addition to having 3 other open criminal indictments in both state and federal courts, which I would argue is something that the court can consider. I mean, how many defendants stand before the court with multiple open indictments in multiple jurisdictions? It's a pretty long rap sheet that he has, but also that like I said, also that he has these other civil cases. I mean, like I said, the guy's essentially a rapist, right? And someone who has a fraud in business, right? That's what he is. And then look at the 70 or so legal cases that he brought, lying about the election when he tried to steal the election and kept saying fraud, 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 fraud. He lost every single one. The guy is not believable. He's not truthful, and he should absolutely not be given credit for anything that he's done positive, because I can't think of anything. His character is one of a fraud, and he should get the maximum he could get in this particular case. And think about how he's treated the DA in this case, right? He posted a baseball bat next to the DA Bragg's head, calling for death and destruction. That is easily can be considered by the court, as well as the fact that he's repeatedly threatened the judges, court staff, prosecutors, and other cases. Those are all things that can be taken into consideration when determining whether or not to sentence him to prison. And so I think that prison may happen, should happen. This is a serious case when you look at the defendant and you look at what he's charged with. And I'm going to leave you with one example. When you think about Al Capone, right, the most notorious gangster who was killing people and just a really, really violent, bad person, Al Capone, they could never get him for those crimes. So they got him on tax crimes, because sometimes it's about the crime and sometimes it's about the person, and you do what you can and you prosecute them for what you can prosecute them for, just to get them convicted because they are a bad person. And I argue and submit to all of you, and this is what I would say if I was the DA, that this isn't just a falsifying a business record case, a Class E low-level felony. This is about using whatever tool you have in your toolbox to get a really dangerous, bad person off the street. And so just like Al Capone was never a tax case, this case was never about a porn star. This has been about an election, a man who's tried twice to steal an election and destroy our democracy, and he deserves state prison. So that's what I would submit to you is the importance of this case, and would argue why this case absolutely needs to be one to watch. And I hope the judge incarcerates him. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo with Legal AF. Join us every Wednesday and Saturday. And I am so proud of my old office, the Manhattan DA's office, for bringing this really important case.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.